Hello book fans, I'm here to talk about George Monbiot's Regenesis, which is a book that's been released recently, and it's perhaps the most important book that you will read this year if you choose to read it, which I hope you will. I got mine from the library, the best place to get it, because you might not want to purchase it based on what I kind of say, but you are going to want to read it because it's very important for you, for everybody, for the planet. And I know people don't like to read about these things, but it's about farming, agriculture, and where we basically get our food from. So it covers a lot of topics, and it talks about some of the problems we have in modern farming and the way that works out, and the way it ultimately destroys the ecology of the soil, destroys plants, animals, that kind of thing. It's not just about all the non-organic farming as well, and saying that organic farming is the way. It's not about that either, but it talks about pretty much everything in farming and where the problems are and what we need to address in order to have a better future for ourselves as well as for the planet, because it's very important. Now, first thing, as a book, I think it reads pretty easily, but I've got a scientific background, so some might find it a little bit more difficult than others. So what I would say is the first chapter, for me, I thought was really engaging and interesting, but it is entirely about soil. So what I would say, I wouldn't use that as your benchmark for the whole book. So if you start off on that chapter and think that's rubbish, it's boring, just go to the next chapter. What lies ahead, what are the problems that we have with modern agriculture and how we go forwards. So it's a very good book. It's quite a short read, believe it or not. It's only 230 or 35 pages, because, right, this is hilarious, it looks like a big book, but it isn't, because the back is all references. So he references everything. Hell, I'm trying to find the end of it. So this is the end of the book here. Yeah, the book, and this is the references. So you don't worry about the size of it. It's not the size that counts, is it? So what's it about then? It's written really well, and I think it is very engaging because it's a subject matter we should all be interested in. So Monbiot talks about farming methods, and we all know that industrial kind of farming that we have, it's all based upon one kind of model that's been exported to just about every country in the world, and it's something that is very detrimental to the soil. So that's why the soil chapter is very good and very important that you do read it. So do come back to it and have a go at it after you've read everything else. Because let me just talk about the soil. The soil matrix is complicated. It's got like millions of different species of animals working within that soil to make it make a productive kind of land ultimately for crops, or not for crops. It may be for specific crops and not the crops that we necessarily want to grow, because the way the world works, you all want to grow the cash crops, the rape seeds, the wheat, and all that business, and those are all they're all annual crops. So the main problem with the soil is that we till it. We dig it up every time we're producing a new crop, which is destroying the soil matrix. Now the soil matrix is made up of not just, you've got wormholes actually. I'm not talking about the science wormhole obviously, but the worms in the soil produce holes which are passed down from each worm generation to each worm generation. So these are holes that last a very long time in the soil, but obviously not if you smash up the soil. As well as that, you've got the other biological factors. You've got the small animals, much smaller than the worms. You've got the bacterium and everything in the soil that makes it an environment within itself. Like Monbiot was saying, that if you took all the animal diversity in the soil, it's as much as you get in the Amazon rainforest. However, it's not as much as you get in the Amazon rainforest soil, if that makes sense. So that's how big this is. We're always talking about conserving the rainforest, but we should be conserving soils as well as the rainforest. And modern agriculture destroys that. That's what the soil chapter should be underlining. But then we talk about farming, modern farming itself, and a lot of this comes from the point of view that animal farming is the worst thing for the planet, because to feed those animals you need a load of you need to grow crops to feed them. So even in the UK, you need about 24 million hectares, but we only have 17 or something like that. The numbers are 24 and 17. We need 24 of them, we have 17. So therefore, the UK that grows a lot of animals, because it said you cannot grow crops on this land, you can only grow animals, well, we're relying on feed, and the feed can be coming from the Amazon rainforest. So, when they say, oh, we're feeding it, we can only grow animals, what they mean, they can only feed animals on that land. They don't necessarily mean that you can't grow crops, because again, it's that soil matrix, and things can change over time. You can grow stuff on land that was deemed unsuitable. There are some examples in this, like Tolly, for example, who's a farmer, and he comes up with some really good ideas, but it is on a smaller scale. On the agricultural kind of industrial scale that we need to feed the world, there's not the perfect solution, but there are an array of solutions within this book. So at the start I lost hope in it, and it's like, oh but Jesus, this is horrific, but by the end I could see that there are potential solutions to the problem, the massive problem of agriculture and how we feed the world ultimately. But the very start would be, we're losing animal diversity. The knock-on effect of that will affect us as well, but we just don't know it yet. So what we would want to do initially is, and I'm going to say it, is stop eating animals, because that is the single thing that's destroying the most amount of land in the world that's agriculture based, and it's also destroying the rainforest as well. But if you take the animals out of the equation, if everyone turned vegan tomorrow, then the problem would be much smaller to solve. But that's the elephant in the room, and you've got to look at it from the polar opposite. So if you had to feed everybody in the world on the same diet as a Western diet, a Western, first world diet, it would not be sustainable for the planet. You would need another planet. Is it another planet Earth or a planet? But you'd need a couple of planets to feed everybody. So we can't do that. We need to stop doing that. We need to change the way we produce. So it's not just about the animals either. It's also about the crops, the annual crops. Now, the good news kind of is that some perennials are being produced, which could be part of the solution. But it's all about yield. What Monbiot is saying is not just go don't go for this tinky winky small stuff, because that's not the answer either. The answer isn't necessarily organic, but it is, what he's trying to say is finding a compromise in finding a crop that can be the most organic or the least destructive to the environment while getting the maximum yield that can feed people. So that is what Monbiot is saying. He's not saying go organic, but he is saying go vegetable, plant-based. And he's gone plant-based as well, but it really doesn't read like a vegan book whatsoever. It reads like a scientific read, because it's taking things into account case by case. But the answer is not super clear, but there are answers within it. But the question of what the problem is that we need to solve, that is quite clear in itself. So things need to be done about it. There are answers within the book, but we need kind of it goes over everything. It talks about the UK and EU laws, like the crazy laws where to be a farmer and get your cash subsidy, you need to destroy the land and the ecology of that land, as in smash up the soil, make it unlivable for any standard plants, but then you don't need to grow anything on it. But then to get the extra money, you then need to fix part of that land and rewild a little bit of it. So it's counterintuitive, and there are problems with legislation and the way that farmers are rewarded. Also, everyone should know this, but sheep farming in the UK is a net loss maker. It's heavily subsidised by the government. Why does that happen? And he talks about why sheep farming is destructive to the natural environment as well. Yes, that might hurt people. People might think this is bad. To take away sheep farming, but again, leaving sheep farming the way it is also horrific. So this book is a must read. It's a 5 out of 5 experience as a read, but I mean, I can't say that it is going to give you happy days, kind of good vibes kind of feeling, but more, you might feel a little bit lost after reading it, but there is also hope within it, so it has a good balance. What else can I say about it? It also talks about the reason why we fight back against these concepts such as veganism and organic farming, and a lot of people say, it's nonsense, you know, but we are told the idea of a farm. We're told a lie from a very early age, basically, about how all animals are happy. There's a lot of cartoons and stuff, so there's a dynamic that we need to sort out to get over our own doubts about these kind of books and this kind of messaging. And he deals with that as well. So it's an awesome read for many reasons, but go at it and try and go at it from either a skeptical viewpoint, but try and be open-minded a little bit about it. And think about what he's saying in the book. Don't just knock it off. If you are a farmer as well, I think it's going to be very valuable for you to read it, because he talks about climate change and the kind of disaster, the impacts upon farms which are occurring, like flooding events, heavy rainfall events, droughts, that kind of thing, and the impacts of that on farming as it is right now compared to farming in what some of the cases that are indicated here as a more ideal forms of farming, which would work a lot better, because our cash crops, with the annual kind of ploughing of the fields, they deal with drought and flooding a lot worse, because of the soil matrix is in a lot worse state. So you end up with these swamplands, and I mean, it's all in here. There's so much. I can keep talking about this all day, and I can keep thinking of new things, but the best thing for you to do is to read it yourself. And if you don't believe what he says, he references everything, so look at the references. I must say, some of the references are good. I mean, the mixed bag of references, some of them I'm not so sure about, but at least he references everything and he's honest about it, unlike some books, unlike certain people. Also check out the farming union debate he had with Minette Batters on the Hay Player, if you have access to that, because that is amazing. It shows how much he's thought about this. He's read about 5,000 papers on agriculture. He's not just glanced across it and gone, oh, this is my opinion, I believe this because I believe this, because there's already a sense of ideals that pre-exist within him. He comes at it from a point of view that this is the right thing to do for the environment. He's a journalist, by the way, if you don't know who he is, and he has a background in biology. He has a zoology degree, I think, so he has a scientific background, which I think is a good foundation to really analyse it, rather than coming from a more ignorant background and having a vested interest in the maintaining the current practices which are wrong of agriculture. Anyway, there's lots of things to debate here, lots of things to talk about, so do drop your comments on what you think if you've read this, and what you think about the book. That would be really good to read, but for me it's a 5 out of 5 experience. You need to read this. I think I've talked enough about this, so if you found that useful, drop a like or dislike or whatever, but I'm just trying to talk about it from an honest perspective. I'm not biased anyway, but my views, I suppose, on climate change is that it's happening. We're getting events coming in, and I am vegan as well, but I'm not really pushy about that. I don't give a damn what you do. You do what you want, but don't come at it and say you understand that this book is wrong without reading it, without taking an open mind to it. So there's my honesty on the cards there. By the way, I'm vegan I'm not for the animal reasons. That was not my foundation of veganism. So I'm not hardcore, as it were, and go around telling people. But if people ask, I will say that's what I am, and then they won't shut up about it. I've got to be honest. I don't try and argue with people about it, because I don't see the point. You can't argue with people about these things. But this book, you can't argue with that either. You can't argue with science. Anyway, that's enough about that. It's a great book. Positives and negatives, but they're all about farming, and there is hope. So stay with it, stay positive, and have a most excellent day, and don't let these things get to you too much. But thanks for watching and staying with me till the very end, and have a great day. Thank you.